I believe that this is a practical world and that I can count only on what I earn.
Therefore, I believe in work, hard work.
I believe in education, which gives me the knowledge to work wisely.
And trains my mind and my hands to work skillfully.
I believe in honesty and truthfulness, without which I cannot win the respect and confidence of my fellow man.
I believe in a sound mind and a sound body and a spirit that is not afraid.
And in clean sport that develop these qualities.
I believe in the obedience to law because it protects the rights of all.
I believe in the human touch, which cultivates sympathy with my fellow men.
And mutual helpfulness and brings happiness for all.
I believe in my country because it is a land of freedom.
And because it is my own home.
And I can best serve that country by doing justly,
loving mercy,
and walking humbly with my God.
And because Auburn men and women believe in these things.
I believe in Auburn.
I believe in Auburn.
I believe in Auburn.
I believe in Auburn and love it.
And love it.
And love it.
I believe in Auburn and love it.
And I can't find a seconder usually when I prepare this, but I don't care. I don't need a seconder. My own opinion is enough for me, and I claim the right to defend it against any consensus, any majority, anywhere, any place, any time. And anyone who disagrees with this can pick a number, get online, and kiss my ass.
No representation is made that the quality of legal services to be performed are greater than the legal services provided by other lawyers. I'm Harry Steele. You found the Backstory Podcast, number 151, the Auburn Greed. I'm joined today by, well, why don't you guys introduce yourselves this time?
I'm John Sophocles, instructor of economics, retired, Auburn University.
Brandon Mosley, journalist, Alabama Today, altoday.com.
All right. So, first up, I want to talk a little bit about the arrest made on the 13th in connection with the leaked U.S. classified documents.
The FBI put on a show of force to arrest a 21-year-old airman in the Massachusetts National Guard. He came out with his hands up in front of his childhood home south of Boston. Attorney General Merrick Garland announced the arrest.
Today, the Justice Department arrested Jack Douglas Teixeira in connection with an investigation into alleged unauthorized removal, retention, and transmission of classified national defense information.
It came 1 week after the Pentagon first discovered some of its most highly classified documents posted on social media. Although the leak started last fall, when secrets first started showing up on a gaming platform called Discord.
However, it slowly spiraled into just intelligence about everything.
The Washington Post interviewed a teenage member of a small chat group on Discord who said the leaks began with text messages quoting from classified documents, and then, when no one seemed impressed, photographs of the actual documents.
It would appear as if he sort of grew angry with the fact that only one or two people were paying attention to these documents that he was pouring his heart out into. And as a sign of just anger, he just decided to post the full documents.
Glimpses of what lay beneath the documents, a countertop and a kitchen floor, matched photos of the inside of Teixeira's home, a digital trail which led the New York Times there ahead of the FBI. Teixeira was stationed at a base in Massachusetts, where live feeds from Air Force surveillance aircraft around the world are downloaded and analyzed. He worked with fiber optic cable and may have been able to monitor the network over which the classified documents flowed.
So it turns out that this fella, Mr. Jack, and you see the takedown here, I just wonder how the camera crews beat the FBI and the SWAT team to his house, right, and set up on the ridge where they could get a good shot of all this. So U.S. intelligence agents may change how they monitor social media chat rooms after missing leaked U.S. documents for weeks. So anyway, this guy's like on Discord, and my understanding of Discord, I'm familiar with Reddit, and they're like, there's Reddit and there's subreddits on all these different, points of interest. So this guy was in a Discord chat room for gamers, and it's not like the Snowden thing where he where he gave it to the press so that they could tell the American people that we were being spied upon. this guy was like one-upping guys, hey, what do you think's going on in Ukraine? Oh, well, this and that's happening. Oh, no, it's not. Check out this document. I mean, it was stupidity.
Yeah, I'm sure he was winning his little chat room, debates with his, 5 friends, most of whom are living in mom's basement. He's the one with the job, and
so
not anymore.
So, John, you and I were talking earlier about the Air National Guard. So,
why does an Air Guardsman have access to this stuff? And there's a really fine gentleman from Mobile named James Hines who's written a book about the Second Amendment and the militia, and he goes through all the constitutional iterations and machinations to have this thing called the National Guard. So I wish that we would quit all this military duplication. Remember back when we had the Army Air Corps and, of course, the United States Navy with an ongoing appropriations. So I think the big question here is, when are we going to admit that these problems keep evolving? You talked about the FBI. The FBI shouldn't exist. There should be ONI for the military side with respect to intelligence, and there should be the federal marshals for civilian. I'd like their offices to be right next to each other. So when ONI finds a civilian that's, in trouble, they walk right over and hand it to the United States Marshals and say, here, deal with it. We have so many different layers of intelligence, the CIA, NSA, ATF, the alphabet soup as well as anybody, that it's actually becoming a national security problem. And here's a classic example of where this should have never evolved in our country's history for us to even be talking about this story.
Not that I'm a big Jim Jordan fan, but they've had a series of congressional hearings about the weaponization of the federal government, and in particular the FBI. And there was some old retired FBI agent that came up there and he said, I retired in 2010 or whatever. And he said, I don't recognize the place because it's not the top law enforcement agency in the country anymore. It is what we always feared. It is a domestic intelligence agency with police powers, which should scare the shit out of everybody, Yeah,
it's what historians would recognize as the NKVD in the old Soviet Union. We just hope to God they're not torturing people and doing summary executions. But everything else, the NKVD wishes they had some of the intelligence gathering abilities electronically that the FBI has at its disposal.
Outstanding point, Brandon. We don't even try and change the nomenclature. Lest we forget, KGB is Department of Homeland Security. All we've done is borrow from all these command and control governments to just give more and more power to the central authority.
And then we entrust 21-year-old techies with our most trusted secrets. It seems illogical to me, but hell, what do I know?
Yeah, I'm not opposed to the Guard having security clearance, but maybe if you wore that uniform for 4 or 5 years, maybe would be like the minimum standard. I'm sure there's a 30-year-old, who's been to Afghanistan and Iraq or, Syria, who might be better to hold that position.
If a guardsman gets called up and deployed and you want to give him those sort of, issues to deal with and security clearances, fine. But the Guard was never designed to be that.
Where he and all his buddies might get their ass blown off if the enemy finds out their positions or who their spy is inside. So here we see shows that Western forces are on the ground, that we've been lied to yet again. How many billions do we need to send? How many of our spec op guys are on the ground? Just give me a no bullshit. In 20
years, we'll read the book about U.S. operations on the ground in Ukraine. No one will care, but it will be a very informative read for the historians.
Well, now that we've put a pin in that, let's get back to, so I'm class of 97 at Auburn. What year did you graduate, Brandon?
93.
So we were there at the same time. It took me 5 years to graduate from Auburn.
How's he now there in 4?
But I think I'm the only liberal arts major who has a minor in chemistry, though. That may be my claim to fame at Auburn. But here you see so this is how important the Auburn Creed is to people like us. And I'll move out of the way so you can see my game day placard that I hang on the front door. This is kind of like the wall in DC, right? And what's so important that we would inscribe it all the way around this park, put it on buildings, right? I believe in a sound mind and a sound body and a spirit that is not afraid and a clean spirit that develops these qualities. Anyway, when I was a pledge, we had to memorize that thing, and I'm a little rusty on it, but I used to know it all. So I thought we would take a look at our new president. And when was he installed? Was that back last year, 2022?
Yeah, last year.
And so we're going to listen to someone I believe you all know. Do you know who that is, Brandon?
Oh, it's Mrs. Hubbard.
Hi,
good.
I'm Susan Hubbard, Dean of the College of Human Sciences. As a longtime colleague of Dr. Chris Roberts, I celebrate his new role as president of Auburn University. With more than 28 years of experience here on the Plains, President Roberts fully understands and lives the Auburn spirit. He is part of the upward movement of this great university and has the vision to take us even higher. Welcome, President Roberts and War Eagle.
War Eagle. I'm Chris Roberts, and I'm exceedingly proud to serve as Auburn University's 21st president. My wife Tracy and I are really looking forward to starting in our new roles here today. And as such, I wanted to take a minute to send a brief note to you all to let.
So he's so proud that's the only orange and blue tie he could find. He couldn't find an Auburn tie.
Let you know what's on my mind. In my 28 years on the Plains, I've come to value and cherish everything that makes the Auburn experience truly remarkable and unique. I've developed a deep appreciation for our culture and how to achieve ambitious goals at Auburn. And through the successes I've observed, Auburn has earned the right to dream the biggest dreams, and we will strive to be nothing short of excellent in all of the areas of our mission as we exhibit leadership as the next generation of land-grant university. I've witnessed the profound economic and social impacts of Auburn University. I've seen what our university can do, and I know how much more we can.
So you see that crane in the background? The only thing that I've seen go on at Auburn is the largest building project in the state of Alabama, save what's going on in Tuscaloosa.
Until we get up the new president.
Right.
It's my intention
Until the new
to ensure
built.
that Auburn provides transformative student-centered experiences to our students that are the best in the country. And it's critical that we continue to attract high-achieving students while enhancing access and affordability. This is particularly important given our land-grant mission and our commitment to the citizens we serve. We will also ensure that we're engaged in impactful research, outreach, and extension that improves people's lives, drives our economy, and advances our society. And in order to do that, we must be an engaged community that exemplifies excellence and innovation in all that we do. And this includes cultivating an environment where everyone is welcomed, valued, respected, and engaged.
I wish Chris Roberts all the luck in the world. I mean, he's certainly qualified for the job. I would have preferred, though, that instead of just moving the dean of engineering over and making him the president, that we went outside the family and got an experienced college president from someplace else to come in and, explore some of the sacred cows that are buried on campus. But
he's one of ours, man. I can walk up to him and smell him and tell he's one of ours, right?
He knows who not to get mad at them.
So, John, I really don't know where to begin. So, I personally know Louder, Hubbard. I'm trying to think if there was anybody else in here. I don't think you got around to Adderholt's wife being on the board or any of that kind of stuff. But, I know several board members.
It's a target-rich environment.
So just tell us about the Auburn Greed.
Well, this is Auburn Greed 2.0. The first Auburn Greed, I guess about 5 years ago, is where we started pointing out a lot of the corrupt things that are going on. Well, I've been doing it for quite some time. I'm an Alabama Gazette columnist for, I guess, about 13 years now. And one of the things that we like to do is observe pay. Like the person who was auditing the Ticketgate fiasco got a 23% raise. And we actually go and question raises. And to have a raise in excess of 8% requires a memo. And we would often go and ask President Gouge, can you give us the narrative, explain why this person made 23% or 15%? And of course, Auburn is completely lawless. They don't follow the memos. All we do is embarrass them. But and with all due respect to what Brandon said, I'm not a fan of Roberts, nor was I a fan with what was going on with him when he was over in aerospace engineering. So perhaps if you'll allow me, I've been supporting 4 federal lawsuits against Auburn University. I got my attorney who took the stuff up to the United States Supreme Court for me to take the case of the witch. A corrupt dean at Auburn University basically said an English instructor was a witch, and we used to say burned, didn't rehire the witch. And this terrible dean imploded under deposition, so they settled. And I'm not sure I could convince the attorney that it wasn't just this little witch burning incident. He was starting to pull the can off of worms that Auburn did not want pulled off. And that's why you keep seeing folks like Buzinger and now Roberts. They don't want anybody from the outside. The reason why they brought in Leith for his little short stint was because he was in so much trouble where he was coming from that he was very easy to control. And some of you may remember the $4.5 million in hush money he was given upon his exit. So they settled with the first case that I was supporting. The second one was just recently heard in Opelika in federal court, where Auburn University was found guilty not only of violation of First Amendment civil rights, but this same dean was found to do it in malice. So the university had to pay another $500,000. Now, this corrupt dean is still employed at Auburn University, making $27,000 a month on the backs of taxpayers and students. And last I checked, was the second highest paid professor at Auburn, and his vita would barely make him an assistant professor at most decent schools.
So
the third, go ahead.
So I just want to give a baseline so people will understand. Like, if you're an economy teacher, adjunct, how much scratch you bringing home?
I'd say, on average, I made about $12,000 a year. And I guess I didn't tell you folks, I worked for Ford Motor Company for 10 years in a real job that paid very well, so I could take my vow of poverty and teach. And that's what I came to Auburn to do, is say, here's how the real world operated, be a bargain for students and taxpayers. And all they do is squander it. Of course, if you run afoul of guys like Felon Hubbard, then you don't get rehired.
So what's a run-of-the-mill tenured professor bringing down?
I would say that at least in the harder sciences, it's going to be around 100,000. And
so, but then if you're a department chair, and then they have endowment seats and all that kind of stuff, where the Ford Foundation gives $20,000 to the Auburn mechanical engineering chair to have somebody with 17 PhDs on staff or whatever. A lot of people don't realize that there are teachers in poverty, and there are department chairs making $325,000 a year, like this guy that you have a beef with.
That's correct. And of course, the one who was a productive chair, and we were talking earlier, the distinction between, producers and parasites, was probably making about half of what this installed head is making now at $275 a year. And once again, doesn't have the vita to support that.
Crash Leach, Stephen Leach.
Leach, I like it. That's much better than Leach.
Is it? So he was given $4.5 million and he signed a Stormy Daniels contract, right?
Well said.
That's
the clearest way you could communicate it to your viewers.
So what in the hell did he know to demand $4.5 million?
Now, he was the president when Roberts' lawsuit was starting, and if you want to look it up, it's the Magliani case. It's the longest one pending in the federal courts. And when he was dean and he was violating Magliani's First Amendment civil rights, and you could go and look at the case, for many years, Magliani would grade, and he was a very well-respected, because he was a productive aerospace engineer, a true rocket scientist, projects.
Yeah, we'll get to rocket scientists. Keep going.
Evidently, some, poo-poo rich family or whatever didn't like the grade that he gave the Auburn students, tried to get him fired and all that. And, of course, this corrupt dean, who's now president, gave it audience, and Leith didn't do his job. When he sent it back on the grievance and said, you need to redo this, he wasn't specific on the charges that he wanted to be rewritten. Well, since Leith didn't do his job, this dean just bounced it right back up, and now we're in federal court for case 4.
So
go ahead.
Is that the lady from Ukraine, the economics professor that's been bounced about?
Well, and she is like the wife of Professor Stern, who just won. So when Stern is beating him up on the House or on the University Senate floor, they're doing their retribution against her, who was a well-regarded teacher, researcher. And so when you compare her raise to, say, Susan Hubbard's raise, it starts getting very revealing. And I'm convinced that the reason why they only gave 7.5% to Susan Hubbard was because that's the most they could show without providing a memo.
How old is this picture, Brandon, of Governor Ivy?
Yeah,
that's when she was treasurer.
Governor then.
All right, so I just want to talk a little bit about who these people are on the Board of Trustees. B.T. Roberts is president of Roberts Brothers Commercial and Property Management down here in Mobile. Doesn't give his bona fide. Let's see here. Robert Dumas is president and chairman of Auburn Bank and Auburn National.
And I believe he has just been retired, sort of under a cloud on a Saturday. I believe he's also on the board for EAMC. So he has his fingers in a lot of pies.
Well, yeah, all these guys do.
Billy Ainsworth to that to the bot about a week ago. I did an article on it.
Yep.
I missed it. So everybody knows who Jimmy Raines is, the only billionaire in Alabama, Yellowwood.
And we reconfirmed him last week when we put Billy on there.
Marion Military Institute, Cumberland Law School, smart guy.
And he said this is going to be his last term.
If you want to start talking about the Rain Kitchen and that little boondoggle, I'll certainly weigh in a little on that.
Oh, yeah, go for it.
So at most normal universities, to get your name on a building, you have to pay 50%. Rain has only promised $12 million, and I haven't seen, the cheesy picture of here's your check university, even though if he's paid that. I'm struggling to get documents out of the university, but evidently the cost overrun for the Rain Center has it approaching $140 million. So I promise you, Rain isn't going to pay anything close to $70 million for that to happen, which of course has been more wealth transfer to Susan Hubbard and her little, and the students and taxpayers get to subsidize his little condo at the top of this building so he can come watch Auburn football games in style.
Well, if I were a billionaire, I would be much more evil.
Well, I mean, your comment earlier, and I wish it had been on air, is making the distinction between the producers and the parasites is important. If you're the producer, they're doing everything they can to crush and extract from you. And, grubbers like Jimmy Rain do very well. How do you think they get the money that they acquire, except for being the grubbers that they are?
So how about Jimmy Sanford, the former chairman of the Birmingham branch of the Federal Reserve Bank of Atlanta? Sounds like Just the party animal.
Unless we forget, remember Louder, the sixth biggest FDIC bank failure in the history of the United States? And when we asked Senator Shelby, you remember Cash Register Shelby, on the Banking Oversight Committee to look into it, there was nothing looked into, but he got his name on a building at Auburn. How much money did he put in for that?
Well, the Louder family's loaded, still are. So, Elizabeth Huntley, civil litigation attorney at Lightfoot, Franklin & White in Birmingham, was appointed to the Auburn University Board of Trustees by Bentley and was reappointed. Yeah.
They need somebody with that experience, I promise.
Here's a good one. Caroline Adderholt. Everybody may know her husband. He's, 7-term congressman from North Alabama?
No, it's more than that. I think he's in his, been there since 96. So what are we talking about, 14th term or something?
Yep.
I don't know if I can count that high on my fingers.
I mean, the only saving grace for her is she was a coyote. I mean, I like coyotes, but, I'm just trying to show you who these people are, and you would think that they would be more fastidious in their trustee duties because, I've been on the United Way board and the Chamber board and the Red Cross board and the Boy Scout, all that, and I was scared shitless signing the 990s at the end of the year. You understand what I'm saying? I mean, you're responsible for all this.
And Kay Ivey, who I don't know how she survived the college savings scandal, but we've asked her to look into the softball rape scandal and a bunch of this other stuff, when nobody even knew it was happening, and she does nothing. And, of course, when it matters more to be in the pocket of the ACCA and the BCA, the alphabet soup as well as anybody, Harry, they don't care about the well-being of students or girls getting raped or sham degrees.
Well, and I'm glad you brought that up because my degree over here is in public administration, and it turns out that's what all the football players were taking for the last decade because it was bullshit classes. That really made
football, 70 hours a week and still get a 3.5 in public administration, apparently.
I really hate Paul's not here because we've battled with the bar over and over and over again. So that's Mr. Pratt's claim to fame, as he is the past president of the Alabama State Bar, which ought to tell you all you need to know. Old Raymond here is the chief executive officer of Harbert Management Corporation. I'm not familiar with them. Is that Harbert Construction?
Yeah, that's Harbert Construction. He's the Harbert heir.
Hellfire. Well, he's loaded.
Yeah.
All right.
His family was ultra rich when we weren't even thoughts yet.
So Quentin Riggins, the last time I saw him, he was on the sidelines during the game, and they cut to him, and he was unprepared, and he said, "It's cold down here. Back to y'all." Same guy, right?
Montgomery, he was Alabama Power's Montgomery lobbyist for a number of years.
There you go. And then he went to work for who? Senior Vice President of the Business Council, where he led governmental affairs. I mean, is he one of the $100 million gas tax guys, or was he doing something else by then?
Yeah, I don't know when he left Alabama Power. I mean, at some point he left and Wesley Britt got his job.
I got you.
But the exact dates, I'm not sure.
Wayne Smith, executive chairman of the Tennessee-based Community Health Systems Incorporated. He got a master's degree in education from Auburn. That's interesting. How about this guy? Smith served as Alabama Power Company's executive vice president of external affairs and is responsible for government relations, corporate affairs, regulatory affairs, environmental affairs, public relations, and charitable giving. Just another swell guy. And then
great public servants.
Timothy Vines is the president and chief executive officer of Blue Cross and Blue Shield of Alabama.
Have met Timothy before.
A lot of heavy hitters on this board, boys.
Yep.
Y'all sure y'all want to continue with this podcast?
I love talking about my public servants, don't you?
I sure do, because by God, if I was on there and did this shit, people would be talking about me. So there's my easy chair with my Auburn stuff, and there's me in high school. I mean, we're just Auburn people. There's my
Hey, I've got the hat.
There's my great grandfather that graduated from Auburn in 1916. I mean, this is painful, man. Nobody wants to admit that a beloved institution like Auburn is just a trough for all these snouts, which is exactly what's going on.
The Auburn I came to in 1992 and the one I observed today is impossible to reconcile. What do you think old George Petrie would think of if he saw the Auburn today that from the one he was writing about in 1943?
If we'd wrapped him in copper and put him inside of a magnetic field, he'd generate a lot of power. He'd be spinning so fast in his damn grave. Yeah. I did learn a little bit at Auburn. Not much, but I did learn that.
Don't tell Alabama Power that. They'll want to use it.
So, Brandon, this is your article. Why don't you tell us a little bit about it, this legislation?
After the Great Recession, the big concern of the legislature was getting the economy back up and going. But we went from like 2.3 billion in the general fund, down to like 1.6 billion a year. And education wasn't that much better. We've got the economy turned around. Unemployment's down to 2.5%. Anybody who wants a job can get a job. But the problem is there's a bunch of people in Alabama that apparently don't want jobs.
So, John, can you jump in there and tell us about being the economist here, what the workforce participation rates are in Alabama?
And that's what you need to focus on. Almost unemployment records or the way they record it now is a joke. And Brandon's hit the nail on the head. There's a whole bunch of folks that just aren't either wanting to or willing to work. I mean, look at me. If Auburn wasn't such a sewer, I'd be still working. I'd be part of the employed workforce. And, that's why I'm fighting so hard with, supporting these federal lawsuits. I'd love for Auburn one day to be a place worthy enough to work again. I'm betting there's a whole bunch of folks that are out there like me that are just saying it's just not worth it. I've heard more of my fellow teachers, whether they're in higher ed or even at K through 12, that have just said it's gotten too much to bear. They're not working. So not only do you have to pay attention to the reduction in participation, but where you're seeing it skewed towards.
Well, but it's not that we have 45% of the workforce that are welfare queens. Some of them are too young to work. Some of them are retired.
I mean, this is people 16 and above. I mean, the real labor participation rate is really in the 40s, but we're not counting children because you can't help it if you're 8 years old and you're 8 years old.
So what are these benchmarks that this legislation is requiring?
They want you in high school in order to get we made it easy. Federal government was breathing down our back about graduating from high school. We got rid of our graduation exam and we made it easier to graduate from high school, which was cool. Our high school graduation rate is up in the 90s. It's doing pretty cool now. I mean, you really got to be dumb not to be able to just hang around and get some sort of high school diploma of some sort. But a big chunk of those kids, they don't go to college. Half of them, if they do go to college, they drop out. And a bunch of them don't have a lot of workforce skills. And we've got companies and businesses that are beating down the doors of their state legislators saying, hey, get me a job. Give me people that will take jobs. I've got jobs. Where are your people? And we keep luring people from out of state, tell them how wonderful the workforce is, and they get here and they just have to outbid the existing employers.
Out of state hell over the border.
Yeah, we're luring companies here with incentives, and the companies come here and they have a hard time. If you're taking like 2,000 jobs up in Huntsville, you got to pay. That's why the jobs they lure in pay more than the jobs that are here. So what we're doing now is, hey, dude, if you want that high school diploma, we want you to be in an apprentice program.
Perfect word, Brandon, to lure them in. This is one of the huge distortions that economists, at least economists like myself, talk about, in that we bring in industry that otherwise would not come here on the backs of small businesses. I mean, use things like eminent domain abuse to create Targets and Walmarts that kill the local small businesses that tend to be the better job generators, at least, not paying folks to where they have to be on food stamps and all these other programs to exist. And I don't see anybody talking about, I think 4 bills now in the legislature to lure even more, to make us competitive.
Shit, you're talking about, you're talking about the game plan. You're talking about the game plan.
2 game plan bills passed the Senate on Thursday and 4 passed the House also on Thursday. I think 2 of those are actually the same bill. So it's 5 bills essentially.
Gotcha. And most decent economists who look at that is it's a net loss. When you look at what you spend to lure them here and then create the distortions that we're talking about right here. We don't have the, workforce and educated employer or employees that the employers are looking for. So you just end up in this infinite regress of things getting worse and worse.
Well, there's a ton of guys that are in their 60s who are experts at pulp and paper, and all that's gone. And up in Gadsden, there are a bunch of guys in their 50s and 60s that are experts at making steel, and all that is gone.
And a lot of them got pensions and whatever, or they've got some little sideline or whatever. They didn't go back in the workforce.
Right.
I was amazed when I came to Alabama at the incredible automotive workforce here. The technicians were outstanding. They knew what they were doing. We brought in all these auto plants and stuff, destroyed those small shops, machinists, mechanics. And now, places like Southern Union, I'm sure they're all over the place throughout the state that used to do a great job teaching those vocational skills. They're more interested in just scarfing up the typical college money. Some of you might remember Roy Johnson going to jail. It was a huge debacle. Higher ed has just become a sucking of dollars throughout this state to provide an inferior result.
Well, we're going to have you back on because we're going to do a whole episode on Joe Bonner and the University of South Alabama before it's over with, because I haven't heard a peep out of him since he got down here.
Surprise, surprise.
Mm-hmm. So,
see, they want you, if you're going to college, they want you to take the ACT, and they want you to hit a certain benchmark.
What'd you make
if you
on
hit
the
a higher
ACT?
benchmark, you're good. We'll give you the high school diploma. If not, they want you in like dual enrollment, where you're taking, college courses while you're in high school, or you're in advanced placement classes. I don't know why anybody who's in advanced placement classes can't hit a high benchmark. That's the college path. And the career path is you took the test for the military. There's a military path.
That's right.
And there's, the apprentice program. And then there's all the different vocational programs that we're cranking back up in the high schools, or adding, we've brought these employers here and they can't get workers. So AIDT is actually setting up labs in, the local high school to teach the high school kids how to work at that plant.
I don't know if Brandon looked at this when it was going on, but the articulation agreements between the universities and the Southern Unions and the 2-year college system, you basically have folks that won't go to Auburn. They'll take the principles and introductory classes with inferior instruction. Then they come to the university and they're unprepared. Well, does that sound familiar? It's just like Brandon talking about. We've got 90% graduation rates.
Aware, and the workforce development people are both very aware of that. In theory, you can go to Jefferson State or any of our local community colleges for 2 years and enter Auburn or Alabama as a junior. And it sounds, parents buy into this, students buy into this, but a lot of the coursework at our community college is not on par with an Alabama, an Auburn, a UAB, or a South Alabama. And so, and then what people don't realize it, you've taken all the easy freshman and sophomore stuff somewhere else, and you're just all of a sudden been dropped into Auburn, and you're supposed to take junior and senior level classes all stacked up in that first year at generally a whole much higher academic level than you've ever experienced. So a lot
You
of
nailed
that,
it.
yeah,
You
a lot
nailed
of
it,
that,
Brandon.
hey, I can do 2 years at JUCO, I can do 2 years at college. Turns out I've spent 5 years at college and I still don't have a degree.
My teaching career began at Clemson in the late 80s, and over those 3 decades, you would be terrified at the decay I witnessed in just simple basic skills. Can you do a percent? Do you understand the linear equation, being able to read a simple graph? But like I say, I mean, Brandon talking about, we've got 90% graduation rates. It looks good. Well, what looks good and what's in fact coming to my classroom, oh my gosh, hard to reconcile.
And another problem they have is that, a lot of these people go to college. You pay a little junior wants, maybe somehow he gets into Alabama or Auburn, or he goes to JUCO. And a lot of them, when they actually take the placement tests and whatnot, their college counselor has them basically in college taking high school classes to get remediation in the stuff they did not learn in the previous 12 years. And so they're accruing debt. This is costing mommy and daddy money out the wazoo. And you're taking like 6 remedial classes. Basically, you're burning a year of college and getting like nil in actual college credit.
Yep. Somebody's got to pay these corrupt deans and heads and chairs.
Now, John, you got to understand, I have a theory about this supermajority that the Republicans hold. We're going to legislate our way into utopia, right? And so nothing can be left to chance. This is a good example. Senate votes to require electric bicycle riders to wear helmets. So do we have to, go get a motorcycle license to ride one? Just where is the line here?
What we did not experience in our youth is, you had motorcycles, which are like a car on 2 wheels with a gas powered, motor. And you had bicycles where you pedaled. And unless, you're, Lance Armstrong and doping up, there's only so fast you can go on a bicycle. At some point, little geniuses have come along, and they have figured out that if I put a little electric motor on there, I can pedal, and that electric motor will help me generate more speed than Brandon can do pedaling. So you can go 20, 24 miles an hour on these little electric bikes, or they call it e-bike. This regulation is dealing with the e-bikes. Is he a bicycle like Brandon in his 10-speed, or is it a motorbike? So what they've done is they've created a separate classification. And the e-bike guys, there's 3 different classes based on how fast the little guy will go. The fastest class, it'll do like 28 miles per hour, I think. You've got to be 16 years old. And the other 2 classes, you've got to be at least 14-year-old to drive. But you can drive it, on basically the bike trails. You probably see them down in South Alabama if you look.
Oh, we got them.
We've decided those little people are out there, they're zooming around at 25 miles an hour with their electric motor. We want to wear helmets.
Okay.
That's what this legislation does, is it sets age limits and requires all 3 classes of e-bike riders to wear helmets like they're motorbike riders.
So is this coming from the insurance lobby where everything else
I'm sure
comes
the
from?
insurance companies are for this. Because, the last thing Brandon wants to do is come out and hit some little e-bike dude that went 20 miles an hour in front of me out there on the highway. and he fall and hit his head, and now he's got brain damage. And is suing Brandon's insurance company for like $500,000. Take care of him for the rest of his life. So we want him wearing a helmet. If I'm gonna hit him.
Okay, so Device's concept bill returns to Alabama legislature called a slap in the face. So this is Ed Oliver. I guess he's the sponsor of the bill. Professor, when I went to school was a place where all your preconceptions were torn down and you were basically destroyed as an undergraduate, and you were told that everything you thought you knew was a bunch of bullshit, and you better read this book, son, and you better read this book, but we can't talk about divisive concepts. It's kindergarten all the way through school.
In our generation, for most of us, when we went back home around the Thanksgiving dinner table, our grandparents were like World War IIers, and they didn't agree necessarily with our newfangled college boy ideas, but they sort of accepted it as, well, this is a college deal, and they have weird ideas. What we got is a University of Alabama professor came up with a critical race theory, claiming that all of America is, racist and was made to perpetuate white supremacy. And this has gotten real popular in academic circles. And with our generation, granddad generally is an Auburn or Alabama graduate. We're not first generation college kids now. It's third, fourth generations. And the parents are not like that World War II generation. They got no problem calling their state representative and said, hey, my grandkid said some crap about George Washington being a racist, and I don't like it. So change it. And, and again, the critical race theory thing, we've got a lot of people that won't be in the workforce because, they think America is all set up to help the racists. And so the people that matter have gone to their legislators and said, critical race theory, get rid of it. Now, last year, it became divisive concepts to try to get it through the legislature because critical race theory, white versus black, Republican versus Democrat. So it became divisive concepts, and it passed the House, but got stalled in the Senate and committee on the last week of the session. Ed's bringing it back this year.
A lot of this is like Common Core. We just changed the nomenclature to get it through. When critical race theory first came down the pike and I would be, assigned to go talk at some committees, I told them I'd be happy to talk about it. What's the critique? And when they'd start hearing, what I do in my classroom, talking about how the minimum wage aids and abets discrimination and eminent domain abuse disproportionately levied at folks least able to defend themselves, blacks and minorities. When I would talk about, Washington and Jefferson being, slave owners and all that. Yeah, look at how they worked towards ending British mercantilism, which really aided and abetted the slave trade here. Most students don't even know that importation of slaves was abolished in 1808. The Constitution said, first year you can do it is 1808. When did we do it? 1808. There went after some legislator, I can't remember his name, was it Dismukes? Because he was at a Nathan Bedford Forrest birthday party. Nathan Bedford Forrest had 3,500 blacks attend his funeral because the blacks, and of course he loved his Confederate soldiers, et cetera, thought the world of him because he actually tried to stop a lot of the hatred that was levied at him. So I love how you started, Harry. Is you're supposed to go to college to get this different perspective and stuff that they haven't been told, but I sure don't see that going on in colleges anymore.
Agreed.
Was that a long enough rant for you, Harry?
That was perfect. So along these same lines, this is the superintendent of education of the state of Alabama. Okay, can you believe he would make a statement like this?
Oh, I mean, this thing that we can't call failing school a failing school, if you're the bottom 5%, I mean, Alabama pre-COVID, the COVID thing has kind of messed up the rankings. Alabama was so far in the bottom 5% of schools nationally, state, the public systems of Alabama, it wasn't even funny. And Alabama, U.S. is like 20th if you compare us to Europe. If you're the bottom 5 percentile of schools in Alabama, unless God has just come down and, blessed your valedictorian, that person's probably not college ready.
Not that I think you need any help beating a dead horse, Harry, but remember before we had this Republican supermajority, and of course most of them are just Democrats wearing the red jersey, we used to land in the middle pretty regularly. But, when you start getting Bob Riley and folks like Mackey in the mix where education is more about wealth transfers than education, why is anybody surprised to see us falling like a rock?
I agree. I think the state of the public school system is terrible. Baldwin County High School, where I graduated from, do they call it a Title I school if more than 50% of your students fall below the poverty level? Is that what it is, Brandon?
I don't know.
Is it a Title
I
I
don't know
school?
what the exact percentage is, but
well, anyway, it's a Title I school, and I was not the valedictorian, but I'll promise you, I was prepared for Auburn when I went. You know what I mean? So if you want to learn, even if you're in a terrible school, I believe that you can. Now,
Parker released some numbers because they made everybody take the ACT, and this was a few years ago. After I think Brandon did an article on it, I haven't seen those numbers since. There were some schools where nobody scored high enough on the ACT for the minimum admission to Auburn or Alabama.
Wow.
Now, of course, since COVID, I don't think they're even looking at ACTs anymore. So if you've got money, we'll take you.
So I was in the advanced placement, whatever, and in 10th grade, we had to take the ACT. And, just for progression purposes, right? So I signed up for it. I didn't realize it was the first Saturday of spring break. So I go on down to the beach Friday night and just get shit-faced drunk. And it was like it was these older guys a couple years older than me. I rode back to town with them. We took it at Faulkner Community College in Bay Minette, and we were all just so hungover. I went in there and took it. I made a damn 23, and I was like, I ain't never taking it. It might be a fluke. I'm never taking it again. I don't remember taking it. I was sitting there thinking, just don't throw up on your damn test, on your Scantron. Man. So speaking of schools, Brandon, tell us a little bit about the mommy and daddy legislation.
Yeah, this is a Barbara Drummond bill. She got this barely through the House Judiciary Committee on Wednesday. If you've got a gun in your house and you've got kids, and somehow the kids get a hold of your gun and take it to school, may not, I'm not talking about him shooting anybody or threatening to shoot anybody, but they find your gun brought to school by your kid, there's going to be blue lights coming to your house and they're going to arrest you. That's the plan. This is another, makes the defense attorneys more money. In my day, was there a shotgun behind the seat of my truck? A bunch? Yeah.
Because we all go hunting before school.
Anything about it? Or a 22 rifle? Now, they're probably expelling the kid from school and sending them to alternative school. And if this bill somehow passes the legislature, they're throwing mommy and daddy in jail.
So, Brandon, in 1984, my papaw died, the man that you saw that went to Auburn. And when my Uncle Ed got back from World War II, the Auburn Extension Service, or whatever the precursor to that was, they had a competition to see who could grow the most cotton per acre in Alabama. And the prize was this, y'all ever see, I think it's a Model 12 shotgun, pump shotgun, which was, revolutionary back in the day. And so I took that damn gun to school in 1985. No, for show and tell. Nobody thought anything about it. I didn't put a zip tie through the chamber or anything like that. We didn't have zip ties. Just carried it to school. Ms. Mixon was my 5th grade teacher, and was like my Sunday school teacher too at church. And she was like, when we get done with this, I want you to walk back home and put that gun up. We don't need it at school all day. And I was like, all right. So after 3rd period, I took it back home. But I mean, you think about how, and I'll say this. Not one person at Baldwin County High School, when I was going there, who went hunting that morning, if they got in a fight at lunch, they didn't think about that gun as a problem solver. I'm going to go get my gun out and shoot somebody.
When I was, in school, in elementary school, we had the bicentennial of the country, 1976, 1776. My family made me, we had our revolutionary deal. So they got a little seamstress, and I think my mother worked on it. They made me like a Revolutionary War uniform. And of course, I had a toy rifle. I had a toy replica of, a
musket.
Of a musket, like they would have had, Kentucky flintlock. And they thought little Brandon needed a sword.
Oh, no.
And what they did was gave me like a World War I bayonet that's in a scabbard, and I'm wearing that to school. And I wore that like several days. And hey, I mean, I wanted to stab everybody in the 1st grade. I could have.
But you didn't, did you? Oh, man. All right, so 1 in 5 adults say that they've had a family member killed by a gun, new study finds, and I think we can link that back to the 20% of people that are not employed and into nefarious things. And
over half of those
people get killed.
Suicides. You said 1 in 5 had a family member killed by a gun. Most of those, probably 2/3, are suicides. Well, we count that in as gun violence to inflate the gun deal.
There it is, 19% of those. That's a good call, Brennan. Sight unseen. So, so I really do not understand this at all. Steve Marshall has defrocked all of the attorneys at the Department of Corrections. Prior to this action, they were all assistant attorney generals, meaning they could represent the state of Alabama in a lawsuit against the state. So now, what the hell are they doing if they're not representing the Department of Corrections in litigation?
He went off on the Ethics Commission, I think a year and a half ago, and did the same thing to their attorneys.
That's because they were lying to the Ethics Commission.
Well,
dude.
That's true. But I think what's happening here is we've got the federal government suing us, saying our prisons, violate the Constitution. It's a cruel, unusual punishment to be in an Alabama prison. The conditions are so bad. So there's this ongoing litigation. And I think there's a disagreement between the ADOC attorneys and the outside counsel that's making bank off of this lawsuit on whether to settle or not. I don't know whether Marshall doesn't want them to settle. That would be my guess. Or Marshall does want them to settle, but there's a disagreement on how we proceed in that. So Marshall's throwing his weight around to get his way in how we proceed with that lawsuit, as well as the lawsuit, that is currently in federal court, in Myron Thompson's courtroom, about health care and security guards and mental health care for the prisoners.
But what are these 7 lawyers and their 14 paralegals doing from now until the end of time? You think he's going to give it back once this thing's settled? Or do you think it'll change when he runs for governor and gets his ass whooped?
I mean, I would hope at some point that, they come to terms and these guys can actually work on their work officially.
Your former employer, Alabama political reporter, they commented on this last week. And to speak to your point, John, you talk about a Democrat in wolf's clothing. I mean, this guy was an Obama delegate, right? And then switched parties just in time to be appointed in 2010 by Robert Bentley. I mean, my goodness, man. And now he's the Trumpiest Trumper that ever trumped. So
How much do you think you can put credence into those that say they want to report, a bunch of deaths and horrific conditions to support all the wealth transfers for building these mega prisons? I mean, to Volcker and the usual gaggle of parasites. And I'm wondering that once they get their way, it looks like they're already going to be able to use ARPA money to build the prisons, that you'll start to see, Myron Thompson back off of all this stuff. And once they get their way, because I don't think they really care about the prisoners or the taxpayers or anything. It's just accomplishing. And this is a pretty big wealth transfer that's in the making.
When I ran for attorney general this time last year, I went around talking about all the illegal bingo halls in the state. There were 33 at the time, and 3 of them opened during the damn campaign. Do you know the McFarlands from Tuscaloosa?
I'm betting Brandon does.
McFarland Boulevard, they own the mall. So anyway, that wasn't enough wealth, so they went down to Greene County and bought them a sheriff and a couple of county commissioners and opened up this casino that's like bigger than the Indian casino over here in Atmore, like really impressive. So I'm sure that one didn't get raided, but this looks like something another there in Jefferson County.
Good for show.
And the thing that's going on here is the sheriff's brother is a consultant to these guys, and that's how they get their permits, and the sheriff signs off on it. It's just straight bribery. So, A.G. Marshall working with lawmakers to draft bill to increase sentences for gang-related crimes. So, this is another one of those, I don't like thought crime. I don't like aggravators for motive, or I don't like hate crime legislation. If you burn somebody's house down, I really don't give a shit why you threw a match to it. You burned somebody's house down, or you burned a church down, or you killed somebody.
Joy in their heart or hate in their heart.
Right. It really doesn't matter to me. But all these aggravators that we come up with is just a bunch of bullshit, and it's another way to target certain groups. Of course, the Dixie Mafia has now turned into a prison gang, and they're proliferating again down here on the Gulf Coast. And they're not discriminatory. They'll take anybody, which is different from the Crips, Bloods, Aryan Brotherhood, and everything that came before. So, there are gang-related crimes, and especially in the major metropolitan areas. Brandon, do you want to chime in on this, the sentence for gang-related crimes?
The legislature is just absolutely flustered with everybody getting shot. There's just crime all over the state, and they're trying to come up with easy way to fix this. Prosecuting 16-year-old gang members as adults and locking them up for the rest of their lives seems like a good idea at the time. I'm just worried we still have that federal lawsuits hanging over us. Do we want to add that? I mean, most of the 16, 17, 18-year-olds that are out there shooting people, they're gang members.
Okay.
Or have some kind of gang affiliation. They're wearing gang tattoos, or, they've got gang symbols somewhere, or gang whatever on social media. All of that aggravates this law and, kicks them up from juvie. Even if it's not that major a crime, all of a sudden they're being tried like they're a 23-year-old hardened criminal.
Well, depending on what they did, I mean, is this an aggravator for any criminal?
They did.
Is this an aggravator for any criminal act, or is it just gun related?
I mean, there's a heightened penalty for gun crimes.
But let's just say you stole a car.
This is an aggravator for everything.
Okay, that's what I thought.
So if you're selling weed on a street corner, and then we look and you've got a bunch of Crips tattoos. Yeah, now we're treating you like a 23-year-old.
Interesting. Well, what do you think the prospects are of this thing passing? 100%? Governor signs
there's
it?
A pretty good chance. This has bipartisan support. I mean, I don't think it's a great secret that the majority-minority districts that are represented by Democrats, crime's up everywhere. It's enormous there. So I think the Republicans are going to get this through, and I think the support's going to be bipartisan.
I have this theory. You know how we want to throw everybody in jail? unless of course you're law enforcement, and then you can do whatever. I'm gonna have to bleep that out, but you can do whatever you want to. Former Huntsville police officer out of prison after murder conviction overturned. Okay, so let me tell you about Mr. Darby. So Mr. Darby is a young cop, right? He gets a call that a man is suicidal. He gets to the scene, and there are two senior officers there who have not skinned their weapon yet, right? There's a guy standing in his front yard with a gun to his head. Darby shows up, jumps out with a shotgun, screams, "Put the gun down, put the gun down, put the gun down," and then blows this guy's head off from 10 feet away with a double-aught buckshot. The two other officers have been run out of the state of Alabama. They don't work for Huntsville anymore. The mayor has backed this guy all the way, and the Alabama Court of Criminal Appeals reversed the jury verdict, finding that the judge erred in her jury instructions.
There are a lot of people backing Darby in this. They think he made a split-second decision, and they're good with the decision. Again, without hearing the evidence, I don't know if the Criminal Court of Appeals made the right decision overturning this or not. You know, Darby is not without his defenders.
Well, Judge Pate is one of the jurists in the state that gives me hope, and a jury of my peers found this sumbitch guilty. All right? Now, if there were some problems with the jury instructions, that's fine. Let's retry the guy. But he shouldn't be out walking around. They released him right out of Limestone Correctional Facility. He's out walking around. Might be down here at the beach tonight. Who knows? Or up in Auburn. So, yeah, so there's the Darby story. So then there's the ex-Walker County Sheriff's deputy pleads guilty to manslaughter in an off-duty crash that killed a teen boy. So you know how you were talking about people wearing their helmets and stuff? Former Walker County Sheriff's deputy charged with manslaughter in the 2019 on-duty crash that killed a 14-year-old boy has pled guilty as part of a plea agreement, court records show. The indictment against Hudson stated that he was under the influence of alcohol at the time of the crash and was driving his patrol vehicle at excessive speeds in an unsafe manner and without his emergency lights on. And he hit this kid riding his four-wheeler and killed him. So what do you think his plea agreement was, Brandon?
He gets out on probation.
5 years suspended for probation. That's right. So if he were to go to jail and he were a model citizen or a model inmate, he would get good time, right, Brandon? Which means you get your sentence reduced.
Not for manslaughter anymore.
Not for manslaughter.
Yeah, they changed that after the guy got good time and then killed Officer Reisner up in Florence.
Right.
The Sheffield officer.
So who's this going to cut good time back for, this new bill?
Not that many folks. Alabama's good time was already limited, where murderers and rapists and major drug traffickers and violent robbers couldn't get it. So, your career criminals that, have these little, drug selling and burglary and theft convictions, if they behaved good in prison, they could get out. Of course, one of them that kept causing troubles, and he was like a clean-cut white boy, for whatever reason, some prison let him out. 3 days later, he's in a stolen car. He's pulled over by two Bibb County deputies, and he shoots both deputies, killing one of the officers. So because of what happened to Deputy Johnson down in Bibb County, we're severely limiting the good time. Before Ivy put her reforms in place in December, good time was decided by individual prison wardens. Okay. So there are prisons where nobody got good time, and prisons where everybody that could get out of there got good time. Ivy put restrictions on there, limiting who can get it, and under the circumstances, this goes even further.
Well, it's a torture chamber of rape and murder, and I don't know why anybody would think that spending more time in there would make you a better person. Just me.
Full disclosure, Harry, I'm one who actually goes into the prisons and teaches, and it's abundantly clear to me that there are folks that belong there and there are folks that would be well served to get out. And I thought when Cam Ward went over to pardons and paroles, I'd see some improvements, but I don't know what's going on, whether his hands are tied or COVID just really put a monkey wrench in all that. But there seems to be no discussion of discretion, and I'm glad that Brandon brought up the discretion that the wardens used to have. That's an important input, in my opinion.
Cam Ward's office was across the hall from mine for 7 years when I worked for the city of Alabaster, and I had high hopes for the things that he could accomplish while he was there, and it doesn't look like that's happened.
In defense of Cam, in 2018, a too lenient parole board let out Jimmy Spencer, and Jimmy Spencer didn't follow any terms of his parole. And, of course, he went back to robbing and stealing and doing what he does. 3 people up in Gunnersville, he executed all 3 of them. After that, Marshall and Ivy basically told the parole board, y'all are gone.
Listen, Brandon, under your theory, the first time I got a flat tire on my car, I'd say, well, shit, I don't want rubber tires anymore. I want something different.
All I'm saying is what happened.
I know, but the system can't be 100%.
And this parole board only gives out parole about 9 or 10% of the time. And the director can, recommend whatever he wants to recommend. There's a clear majority of that parole board that, wants people to stay in there to end a sentence.
Senate committee to hear legislation requiring ethics commission to share exonerating evidence with accused defense counsel. We did a whole podcast about exculpatory evidence, and everybody's familiar with the Brady rule that says if you have information that you're going to present at trial, you have to share it with the other side, even if it's information that shows that they're innocent. And that's exactly what this legislation does. It's a bit self-serving because everybody in the legislature is beholden to the Ethics Commission, so they don't want to go in blind like Mr. Barbie did and some of these other people. What was it, the police chief in Montgomery was the case where they had evidence to show that he didn't do anything wrong, and they ruined his career and that of his chief assistant. So, no shock there. I'm sure this will fly through there like grape nuts through a goose, don't you?
This legislation I didn't cover. I was in the hearing, but I had to go to another committee meeting because the committee meetings are overlapping now. Cynthia Ralston, who's the counsel for the Ethics Commission, and Tom Albritton, who's the executive director, were both there. And the committee gave this bill a favorable report based on what I'm reading. Though I missed the debate on that. So the House could take this up. I don't know if it's on the calendar for Tuesday or not, but anytime this week if they wanted to.
Well,
it's the Senate. This is a Senate bill. The Senate could take it out.
Well, they wrote themselves an ethics opinion saying that they don't have to turn over shit because of the Grand Jury Secrecy Act. And I guess that's what this is going to undo.
This Arthur Orr's legislation here undoes that and would treat the Ethics Commission like any other court in the civilized world, where if they find exculpatory, information during their investigation that might lead a jury to believe the guy is innocent, they have to notify his defense counsel that, we have that.
Good deal. Well, there's no more ineffective group of people that I've found in the state of Alabama than the Ethics Commission and their staff. Totally ineffective. They don't even lie about it. They'll say, well, we looked at this and we don't think there's anything wrong with that. I'm like, have you read Title 13 of the Code of Alabama? Oh man.
I mean, I don't think necessarily that Steve Marshall has done the greatest job of prosecuting political corruption. He's prosecuted a whole lot more people than the Ethics Commission has in recent years.
Pretty low bar, Brandon.
Yeah, people send in, complaints. I mean, that's where complaints go to die. I don't think the ethics commissioners even get to see most of what they get.
They don't because administratively, Albritton weeds them out and throws them in the garbage. He's the guy that decides.
Investigated and says, we saw nothing, we heard nothing, we know nothing.
So our only newspaper in print down here, John, is the Lanyap newspaper. And
I'm a subscriber. I love the Lanyap.
Okay, so one of the stories they cover in this edition are the changes in plans unveiled for the Fairhope Triangle property, and I really hate Paul's not here for this because this burns his ass up. So the Dias family, which are kind of like the Steele family, except they have a bunch of money. So they own this triangle as you come into Fairhope. When you turn right off of 98, family tried to develop this parcel and for commercial purposes, and the city had it zoned rural agricultural. So they turned down their plans. They turned down the subdivision of the property, which initiated a federal lawsuit saying it was basically a taking, right? They devalued my property because they won't rezone it. And so the city ended up having to buy this damn thing for like $17 million. So what are you going to do with $17 million piece of property? We're going to put a walking path on it and maybe an archery range and a jungle gym. You know what I mean? It's just ridiculous what these people get away with. So, staying down here, PSC president says environmentalists cannot be pleased on berry plant. So, anybody who knows me knows that I'm an environmentalist, and I want to save the woods because I want to hunt and kill all the little critters that live in the woods, and that means we need habitat. And I like to fish, and I like to eat the fish, which means I'd like to have clean water. It's, there's nothing extreme about my brand of environmentalism, okay? This berry steam plant is just unbelievable. So, like we said before, you recognize our U.S. Senator, Ms. Britt there, and her husband, of course, cut his teeth working as a lobbyist for Alabama Power Company. This is a look at, so there's the steam plant, and you just got to imagine a furnace where they're putting coal in there and burning it, and then the ash and everything's going up the stack, and it gets to a certain point, all the particulates fall back down the stack. And so what they were doing for the last 50 years, John, is taking a damn fire hose and washing it out into this pond. And it's designed to be wet because you can just imagine how fine coal ash is. If it dries out, it'll blow away. So anyway, this is the impoundment. This is not lined. There's nothing under it. They went out there and just scooped it up. And the EPA is saying that it is polluting the alluvial aquifer, which is basically all of the Delta. I don't know if you've seen Ben Rain's little movie about it, but America's Amazon is worth your time. It's on YouTube, so you don't have to pay for it. And there's my little hunting camp, and I am exactly 7 miles on the other side, on the Baldwin side of the Delta from the Berry Steam Plant at Bucks.
I've got a lawyer question for you, Harry.
Oh, no.
Has anybody ever tried to crack that nut with trespass law, right? This is a classic trespass.
The problem that you run into are the different regulatory agencies that they are in compliance with their permit. So you really can't get, that's the nut you can't crack. They're in compliance with Twinkle and her bunch at the Public Service Commission, and they're in compliance with the EPA, or they were. Now, what you got to understand is Obama said that coal ash was a toxic waste and had to be disposed of in a certain way. Trump comes in and changes the law, and as soon as they do, they put this permit in to cap in place. So now the argument is the capping in place is not going to prevent pollution, and they need to do something other than what they've done.
Trespass law would not apply because the coal ash is in a pond on the plant's property. It's not on Harry's property or the other neighboring properties.
But it's trespassing onto other people's property.
Yeah, I think you could get. I think with the right judge that would fly. The person that makes that files that lawsuit is not looking for a big payday. We want the shit removed. And everybody's like, well, do you know what the damage would be to the environment, moving all that? It would take 50 dump trucks, 17 years to move it all from here to a inert landfill in Mississippi, or a hazardous waste landfill in Mississippi. And I'm like, man, they bringing in all this coal by rail and barge, reverse the process.
Yeah.
This is
I think if you got a good jury, having a permit doesn't allow you to do wrong.
Well, they have a stranglehold on the state, and everybody believes that they are the best stewards of the environment because they tell us so on TV all the time. All right, so here's another one. I know this isn't an Alabama thing, but it's a Gulf Coastal thing. The EPA is being sued for approving cancer-causing plastic-based fuel. So proposed emissions from Mississippi Chevron plant could raise local cancer risk by 250,000 times the acceptable level. A community group is fighting back. So there's you can see the Chevron plant down here, and I can't tell where this I think that's the subdivision, but the Cherokee Concerned Citizens, an organization that represents 130 house subdivision less than 2 miles from Chevron's Pascagoula refinery, filed its suit to the Washington, D.C. circuit. That's kind of weird, isn't it? Why wouldn't it have been done in Atlanta? So the petition demands that the court review and revisit the EPA's rubber stamp. I guess because it's administrative, it went to the D.C. circuit.
When that environmental group sued to challenge Alabama Powers, their renewal of their dams on the Coosa River, saying some snails got hurt. They bypassed the Alabama courts and Atlanta and went straight to the Washington, D.C. district because approval was in Washington, not in Alabama, even though the snails that are extinct and the dams are in Alabama.
Well, you know that Alabama has the largest diversity of bivalves in the world in our river system.
And we used to have more than we have now.
Right. And I still don't understand. I thought all plastics were products of petroleum. So then you're taking the plastic and making it back into petroleum. I don't know. We need to have a chemist on.
Some are not petroleum based. I think Brandon even said that earlier. So I get your point, but you might not want to use that absolute.
And I mean, a plastic's nothing but a hydrocarbon chain. If you go back to your organic chemistry, I mean, if you can turn a hydrocarbon chain into plastic, I'm sure there's a laboratory way to turn a hydrocarbon chain of plastic back into a hydrocarbon chain of fuel. Adding water or taking something away, breaking those bonds. I don't know that you can do it cost effectively or without creating, pollution elsewhere. It's hard to do anything with petroleum that doesn't create a slightly higher cancer risk. Generally, benzene that's produced as a side effect.
So, Brandon, do you remember back in the Bush years, there were two big Republican issues that were, until the towers came down, that George W. Bush was pushing. And one of them was the repeal of the death tax, and the other one was tort reform. And I was sure that we would see both of these again, and here comes the death tax again. And, of course, this is the estate tax. Yeah. And I believe right now you have to have an estate of over $16 million for the estate tax to kick in. I don't know how many rural Alabamians have $16 million estates, but they want to make sure that the people can pass their wealth on to the next generation without the federal government getting a cut.
That's true. But when the Republicans passed their Job Act in 2018, it doesn't lower it. You raise it to 16 million or whatever it is permanently. It just did it for a few years, and we're coming back up to 5 million. I am old enough to remember when a 1,000-acre farm sold regularly in this state back in the 80s for about $350 an acre. You could be a honking farmer with big tractors, lots of cows, lots of land, and you were never going to hit $5 million in, estate with it. Times have changed. Good cropland, if you can find it on the market, is selling for about $5,500 an acre. And if you're still in crops today on a big way, you better be doing more than 1,000 acres. So, and, the equipment now, a good combine, which used to be like $60,000, is now like $450,000 equipment. So a farm that probably struggles to clear $100,000 a year, oh yeah, very easily could be in a state of $7, $8, $9, $10 million.
And a lot of what we're talking about here is inflation.
Yeah.
And Harry, if you ever want to have me on again on your show, my wife is like, oh my gosh, is he going to pull the pin on that one? This is what my research is about.
Really?
How we've turned the federal government upside down from what it was designed to finance itself with, say back in 1789, to just this ridiculous, complex federal income tax code, which we were never, ever designed to have. And Brandon's making the point very well that if you're going to do this, why aren't there adjustments? $5 million back in the 80s is, tantamount to $20 million today.
Absolutely.
And ever since, the Republicans closed the gold window, it was closed at 40 some odd dollars an ounce, and gold is now at over $2,000 an ounce. I don't think we need much more evidence to say all this needs to be inflation adjusted in a world where we've got such, strong fiat currency effects.
I can remember selling feeder calves, really good, high-grade feeder calves, and grossing about $420 per calf. The same calf, if I could transport him through time today, yeah, that little sucker's worth about $1,400. A ranch, that had a bunch of cows that used to be worth $350 a head, they're $2,000 cows. And it's not that ranching's become more profitable. It's just that the value of even a bushel of grain is 3 times what it was, in the 80s. Things have gone up a bunch since the 2018 jobs bill.
The value has stayed about the same. The number of green and white slips of paper it takes to get it has changed immensely.
There you go.
Yeah, the farm may not actually be getting what it did in Granddad's day in the 80s. But, and God forbid that it's close to town like in Baldwin County where the valuation is $15,000 an acre because someone would like to put a subdivision there.
Exactly.
Same deal here in Lee County, Brandon, I promise.
All right, so I want to talk about my pet peeve project. When I worked for the city of Alabaster, I was the mayor's liaison to the Jefferson County Metropolitan Planning Organization that was the lead on this back in, 2007 or 8. They went out and bought a bunch of right-of-way from U.S. Steel and Alabama Power Company, and then the project kind of got shelved because it was, basically you're building a perimeter around Birmingham where nobody lives. You know what I mean? It's not like we have an immense amount of traffic and people that we need to move around this perimeter to complete our perimeter around the city. Oh, no, nothing like that. And then you see right here, construction of long-awaited $5.5 billion North Beltway could restart in the spring. And you see they came out here and they did some cut and grade, and then they just abandoned it, and people are dumping boats and garbage and anything else you can think of out there. I was invited not to come back to the MPO. I was defrocked by the mayor, and he said, "No, you're not going back to one of those meetings." But I think the damage was inflicted.
Domain abuse in Alabaster, right?
Yeah, see, I missed that when I first got there. Neil Bortz was just wearing them out over that eminent domain thing they did on the side of the interstate. And then I won't say to my credit because I don't think I did a very good job of it, but I did approve the design of phase 2 of that Colonial Promenade shopping center, and we put in 200,000 square feet of retail and all that stuff that everybody wants. So at the same time, we're foolishly pissing money away up in North Alabama. We just finished a $21.9 million project here on 31 in Spanish Fort, and guess what? No traffic relief whatsoever. It's just as bad as it was when there were construction zones, except now you can go 35 instead of 25. And my favorite is Huntsville's $65 million Sky Bridge Riverwalk project along Memorial Parkway, and I'm just hoping that we don't name it for another Nazi. Y'all are familiar with Operation Paperclip, and there's old Von Braun with his Nazi pen, the swastika pen on, and then historians are reckoning with the former Nazis who launched America's space program. And I don't know
National Socialists get things done, Harry. Don't you know the Audubon?
Yeah, well, I mean, look at the pyramids, slavery, get shit done.
I mean, whatever we say about von Braun in World War II, there's probably never been a better rocket scientist anywhere.
I'm
in the
a
world.
Goddard fan.
We're lucky
Brandon.
we got him rather than the Russians.
Well, there's never been a better rapper than R. Kelly, but he raped little girls, so he's in prison. You see the quantification there, right? This is the Von Braun Center in Huntsville. It is one of the finest facilities in the state of Alabama, is it not? I mean, you guys have been to conferences there, right? They got a big auditorium. I just can't imagine naming something for that guy. So down here in the outskirts of the little hamlet of Baymonette is a community called White House Fork, and when I move to Burns Lake, I will be on their water system. North Baldwin Utilities has been buying up all the little water systems around, and then they're doing things like buying houses at a country club from the mayor's family trust. I'm not kidding. And that's one of the things we reported to the Ethics Commission. They said, oh, there's nothing wrong with that. So White House doesn't want to be part of North Baldwin Utilities. And while I was digging through old pictures, this is the original board seated at the table. And there's Big Harry, who helped everybody start their water boards around here. So I hope that they vote to stay independent. The best politics is local and people to govern themselves. So, Brandon, what do you know about the new COVID variant? Anything?
We have a new COVID variant.
But, I know what it is. It makes you look like you have pink eye. It causes whatever that crud is. You know, have you ever been like conjunctivitis? You wake up and your damn eyes are welded shut with whatever the hell that stuff is.
Yeah, I've experienced that back in the day. Not fun.
Well, I've had it 3 times.
It means what? That the COVID vaccine is less effective now than it was a month ago?
If it was ever effective at all.
How will Pfizer make money off of this?
They'll create another vaccine that, deals with the Arcturus strain. Remember when it didn't work at all for what was the last strain?
Omicron?
Omicron. It can't stop Omicron. It didn't do a great job against Delta. Well, now we'll have to adjust the vaccine and, add Arcturus to the stuff that it'll stop.
So it's already been detected in 27 states, and I think this is the variant that came out of India, like where they all live on top of each other and, drink water out of the river where they put all the cremated bodies and, not the most hygienic place in the world.
Coronavirus. I mean, we probably, in the course of the last 50 years, a little bit more for John Sophocles, have been exposed to a coronavirus 1,000 times.
Well,
that's
cold,
what we used to call the common cold. Somehow the Chinese, dorking around, managed to accidentally weaponize a coronavirus, which is just about unstoppable. They just travel the planet, getting people sick for 3 or 4 days, and we had COVID-19 from it. And I don't know that we're going to live to see a day where there's not a new strain of COVID circulating the planet, because he's a coronavirus and they mutate. That's just what they do.
As long as we keep electing Bidens and Trumps, I'm sure that there will be huge wealth transfers to pharmaceutical companies. I guess what is difficult for me to reconcile is we elect people to D.C. now that don't understand the fundamental role of the federal government. The first time this was noticed, from what I can tell, O&I saw Wuhan as a hot spot in like October, November. If we had a functioning federal government, O&I would call up customs and say, we've got a hot spot in Wuhan. You don't let anybody come in and you quarantine them for 14 days or whatever it is. You don't lock down the entire nation. Now, for us here in Lee County, we experienced it sooner than a whole bunch of other folks in the nation, because all those students that came in from Christmas vacation from Wuhan, and as Brandon said, it just spread like wildfire. We didn't even know what to call it then. So I'd love to see the federal government, and, folks looked at, look at the Obama-Biden plan on how to deal with, these viruses and all that coming in. And when I looked at the plan, there was nothing in there addressing the actual federal role of the government to stop this stuff from coming in. And of course, lest we forget that language in the Constitution to keep commerce regular, because they don't understand their role. Has regular commerce been the result you've seen by this ridiculous COVID response?
Not for my business, no.
There you go.
And what's funny to me is, so you were saying you got it early there. So then we had the stay-at-home order, right? And the sheriff of Baldwin County got on Facebook and said, y'all know that order? Hell with it. Y'all come on down to the beach and bring your plague with you. No kidding. And
I thought that was
we sued him
of Hoss Mack, but honestly, he was right. You weren't going to stop the coronavirus from traveling to Baldwin County.
Okay, well, he didn't know that.
You're not going to stop any coronavirus from crossing any border, or crossing the state line. Once he gets airborne, he's going to travel the planet.
So listen, Brandon, when they pass this dumbass bicycle helmet law, I will abide by it. And I'm not the sheriff of Baldwin County. So when the state health officer issues an order and the governor signs it, it is not in the discretion of some damn sheriff to say, I'm not going to follow it. He does not have that discretion. That is the reason that the sheriff is a constitutional officer. He's not a local elected official. He's a member of the executive branch of state government.
There's a law that's become popular in conservative circles that say, yeah, the sheriff is your last line of defense of the Constitution, so that he's within his power to reject anything he feels, whether it's a gun, gun seizures, which is the one I really think of, or a shut your beach down order, which I probably would have enforced.
What I dislike the most about that, Harry, is that it took the wind out of the sails, the ability for folks to take it to. COVID was real. Folks thought that our response was going to be real or helpful. We did not have rational debate. Some folks needed to act differently than others, right? Somebody who does not have the ability to fight the virus should know and take it seriously. And indeed, it's going to spread, as Brandon said. But imagine if you actually try and slow it and actually see what's going to happen so that folks can have more rational responses at the state. So, yeah, there's the federal government addressing it. And then at the state level, it's important for folks to take it seriously. And what this sheriff did was exactly the same thing that Auburn University did with not taking it seriously. And then when folks say, well, here's the order, and this is what Kay Ivey said, and they're blowing it off, what was interesting in keeping with what you were saying, Harry, is who got assigned to classrooms where they couldn't do protocol and the ones that didn't. So if you're Professor Stern, yeah, you're going to be put in harm's way, and we hope you die. But if you're one of the Politburo members, oh, we're going to give you a semester off.
Well, I can't get into the courthouse to try a case, but everybody, because the sheriff doesn't believe in COVID, he tells everybody to come on down to the beach. You see my problem with it, right? He's going to enforce that part of the order, but not anything that affects the business community down here at the beach, which is his bread and butter.
Which is what they care about more than the well-being of the citizens to make informed decisions.
Thank you.
There are some folks that should take, the vaccine. There are folks out there that should take protecting themselves seriously. And when you have that cavalier or mixed signals going on, I don't think folks have the ability to make rational decisions as well.
I think that's right. Well, boys, we've reached the end of the podcast. Only an hour
Huzzah!
and 45 minutes. And Brandon, I heard your dog, did he die?
No, she's still alive. She's 21 years old and running into some sort of lung issue. When she's asleep and, she's sleeping next to the bed, she doesn't cough at all. But if she gets annoyed or something bothers her in the slightest, then she starts rasping for breath. She probably doesn't want to be sitting on the floor. She wants to be on her couch, but I'm in here, so she can't be in there, so she's annoyed about that. So,
suffering this podcast explains a lot.
Doesn't it, though? All right, guys. Well, John, we really appreciate you participating. Brandon, pleasure as always, and I will see you guys next time. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.